A disturbing development in the search for a young Vancouver woman in Los Angeles.
Investigation into the high school massacre is slow-moving and dangerous.
James's blue and mustard hood, seen here in a security video.
The Turpin family photo, California, 2018. In this photo, the Turpin family stands together during a vow renewal in Las Vegas. The parents, David and Louise Turpin, are smiling proudly. Their 13 children are lined up beside them, dressed in matching plaid outfits. At first glance, it looks like a happy, well-organized family. But the truth behind this photo was far from normal. Inside their home in Paris, California, the Turpin children were living in terrible conditions. They were starved, beaten, and often tied to their beds with chains. Some were so thin they looked like kids, even though they were adults. The children were rarely allowed outside and had almost no contact with the world. On January 14, 2018, 17-year-old Jordan Turpin escaped from her family's house through a window and called 911 using a phone that could still reach emergency services. She told police that her parents were hurting her and her 12 siblings. Officers didn't believe she was really 17. She was so thin they thought she was much younger. But when she showed them photos of her siblings in chains, they acted right away. Police arrived that day and found what they will later name the House of Horrors. Some children were chained to beds. The house was filthy and smelled terrible. All of the kids were thin, dirty, and clearly neglected. The oldest, a 29-year-old woman, weighed only 82 pounds. The children had been starved, isolated, and denied basic care for years, even before the family moved to California. David and Louise Turpin were arrested the same day. They were charged with torture, child abuse, and false imprisonment. They had created a fake homeschool and claimed everything was fine. But their children were locked in rooms, allowed to shower only once a year and given very little to eat. After being rescued, the 13 children were taken to the hospital. Many were underdeveloped and extremely weak from years of abuse. One 11-year-old was so thin, his arm was the size of a 4-month-old baby's. A few days later, prosecutors officially charged them. At first, they pleaded not guilty, but in 2019 they changed their plea and admitted to 14 serious crimes. They were both sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. At the sentencing, some of the Turpin children spoke in court. One daughter said, "I'm taking my life back." One of the sons said he had forgiven his parents and wanted to move on. Despite everything, investigators said the siblings were strong, smiling and hopeful about the future. David and Louise Turpin are now in their 60s and will likely spend the rest of their lives in prison. The children were later placed in foster care or with family. Some have started to rebuild their lives, going to school, learning basic skills, and trying to live normally for the first time. The CCTV image of James Bulger with 2 boys, UK 1993. This photo was taken by a security camera on February 12, 1993. It shows a 2-year-old boy named James Bulger being led out of a shopping center in Liverpool by 2 slightly older boys. James is holding one of their hands. To anyone watching, it looks completely normal, like 2 older brothers taking care of a younger child. But this was the last time James was seen alive. Earlier that day, James had gone shopping with his mother. While she was briefly paying at a store counter, James wandered off. In just a few seconds, the 2 boys, John Venables and Robert Thompson, both only 10 years old, saw him alone and led him away. The security camera at the exit caught the moment they walked out together at 3:42 p.m. Police searched for James for hours. When they finally watched the footage, they were shocked. The boy holding James's hand wasn't a teenager. He was a child himself. As one detective later said, "You had to look twice. It was just something I didn't expect to see." No one could believe that 2 children were behind the disappearance of a toddler. On February 12, 1993, James Bulger wandered away from his mother at a shopping center in Bootle, near Liverpool. At the same time, 2 10-year-old boys, John Venables and Robert Thompson, were skipping school and roaming around the mall. They had already stolen some candy and a can of paint. Then they saw James standing alone near a shop. One of them took his hand, and the 3 boys walked out together. Security cameras caught the moment, but no one suspected anything. People thought the older boys were James's brothers. What followed was a long and terrible walk. Over the next 2 hours, the boys led James more than 2 miles through the city. Dozens of people saw them. James was crying, but most assumed everything was fine. 2 people asked if James was okay, but the boys lied and said they were helping him find his parents or taking him to the police. They led James to a canal and hurt him there. Then they continued on, finally reaching a quiet railway area around 5 p.m. There, the boys attacked James. They threw paint in his eyes, hit him with bricks and stones, and dropped a heavy metal bar on his head. The baby boy instinctively walked back to the boys after each attack. James had over 40 injuries. After he died, they left his body on the tracks, hoping a train would hit it and make it look like an accident. A train did come and struck his body. 2 days later, on February 14th, teenagers found James's remains on the railway line. At first, police thought it was an accident, but doctors found signs of abuse and knew something worse had happened. When police shared the CCTV image of James holding hands with the older boys, the public was shocked. A woman recognized one of the boys in the footage and called the police. On February 18th, both Venables and Thompson were arrested. At just 10 years old, they became the youngest suspects ever charged with such a serious crime in the UK. During questioning, both boys blamed each other. But the evidence was clear. The paint, the blood, and their stories didn't match. In November 1993, their trial began. The boys were so small that the court had to raise the seats so they could see. The jury heard everything. The judge called the crime evil and very wicked. On November 24th, both were found guilty of murder. They were sentenced to stay in custody at Her Majesty's pleasure, meaning for as long as the authorities saw fit, with a minimum of 8 years. The country was stunned. No one could believe 2 children were capable of something so cruel. Venables and Thompson were sent to secure youth facilities where they got education and support programs. After serving 8 years, they were released in 2001 at age 18. Both were given new identities to protect them, because many people were angry and wanted revenge. James's parents were heartbroken by the decision. His mother, Denise Fergus, said it felt like justice was denied. But a European court ruled that keeping them locked up just because of public pressure was not legal, and the boys had shown signs of progress. Since then, Robert Thompson has stayed out of the public eye and is not known to have re-offended. John Venables, on the other hand, has had serious problems. He was sent back to prison in 2010 and again in 2017 after being caught with harmful material involving children. As of 2023, he is still in prison after being denied parole again. James's father has begged officials not to release him. The Columbine High School class photo, USA, 1999. This class photo from Columbine High School shows the senior students of 1999 sitting on bleachers, smiling and joking around. At first, it looks completely normal, just teens posing for the yearbook. But in the top left corner, 2 students stand out. Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold are wearing sunglasses, smirking and pretending to point guns at the camera with their fingers. At the time, most people saw it as a silly or strange pose. No one knew that the 2 boys were secretly planning something horrifying. Less than 2 weeks later, on April 20th, 1999, Harris and Klebold would carry out one of the deadliest school attacks in US history. They had been planning it for over a year, keeping journals and recording videos in secret. They built homemade bombs and got their weapons through friends. Their goal was to cause as much destruction as possible. On the morning of April 20th, 1999, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold skipped class and drove to Columbine High School. In their cars, they had guns and homemade bombs. Around 11:10 a.m., they entered the cafeteria and placed 2 bags under the tables. Each bag contained a large propane bomb, set to explode during the lunch rush. The bombs didn't go off. At 11:19 a.m., the 2 teens walked toward the school's west entrance, wearing black trench coats and war gear outfits. They began shooting students who were eating outside. The shooters went inside the building, firing at random and throwing pipe bombs. The worst part of the attack happened in the library, where most of the victims were shot. By 11:35 a.m., they had taken the lives of 12 students and 1 teacher. More than 20 others were wounded. Some students said the gunmen were laughing and making cruel jokes during the rampage. One teacher, Dave Sanders was badly hurt while trying to protect students and later died from his injuries. At 12:08 p.m., Harris and Klebold went back to the library and took their own lives. Police carefully searched the school and began helping students and staff get out. The full scope of the tragedy soon became clear. It was the deadliest school shooting in U.S. history at that time. In the following days, the town of Littleton was filled with shock and grief. Memorials and crosses were placed near the school. Investigators found journals and videos made by the shooters, revealing they had planned the attack for over a year. Their goal was to cause massive destruction using bombs, and when that failed, they turned to guns. The library, where 10 students died, was torn down and replaced with an open space. The school reopened months later, but many students couldn't bring themselves to return. The event left deep scars on the entire community. The Elisa Lam elevator CCTV footage, Los Angeles, 2013. In the early hours of February 1, 2013, a security camera at the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles recorded something strange. The footage shows 21-year-old Elisa Lam wearing a red hoodie, stepping into an elevator. What she does next confused and unsettled millions of people who later saw the video online. She presses several buttons, possibly all the floor buttons in the middle row. But the elevator door doesn't close. Elisa quickly peeks out into the hallway, then hides back in the corner, as if she's scared or being followed. She goes in and out of the elevator a few times. At one point, she moves her hands in a strange, slow way, almost like she's talking to someone who isn't there. Then she steps out of view, and after a long pause, the elevator doors finally close. This 4-minute video is the last known footage of Elisa alive. At first, it seemed like a weird or playful moment. But when Elisa was later found dead, the video took on a much darker meaning and became the center of one of the internet's most discussed mysteries. Elisa Lam was a 21-year-old student from Vancouver, Canada, traveling alone through California. On January 28, 2013, she checked into the Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles. The hotel had a dark past, known for crime, deaths, and even housing serial killers. Elisa had bipolar disorder and depression. At first, she shared a room with others, but hotel staff moved her to a private room after other guests reported strange behavior. She visited local places, including the San Diego Zoo, and shared her trip online. But on January 31st, the day she was supposed to leave for Santa Cruz, Elisa disappeared. She had spoken to a bookstore manager that morning, who said she was polite but seemed nervous. When her parents didn't hear from her, they contacted police and a search began. For 2 weeks, no one could find her. Police searched the hotel. On February 13th, the LAPD released the now famous elevator video, hoping for tips. The video quickly went viral and internet theories exploded. Meanwhile, hotel guests began complaining about low water pressure and strange-tasting tap water. On February 19th, a maintenance worker opened a rooftop water tank and found Elisa's body inside. She had been in the tank for over 2 weeks. An autopsy later ruled her death an accidental drowning, with her bipolar disorder noted as a key factor. There were no signs of injuries, assault, or alcohol or illegal drugs. She had only small traces of her prescription medication in her system, suggesting she may have missed some doses, which can cause confusion or hallucinations. Investigators believe Elisa may have climbed onto the roof using a fire escape. From there, she likely climbed the ladder to the tank and entered it during a mental health episode. Once inside, she couldn't get back out. The tanks were tall and difficult to escape once inside, especially if she was disoriented or cold. Still, many people didn't accept the official story and came up with their own ideas. Paranormal theories said she was chased by a ghost, since the hotel had a history of deaths and horror stories. But no real evidence of anything supernatural was ever found. The elevator game theory claimed Elisa was playing a scary online game from Korea that involved pressing elevator buttons in a certain order to enter another world dimension. This matched her button pressing in the video, but there's no proof she even knew about the game. There was also no evidence of a struggle or second person's DNA. In the end, the Los Angeles coroner confirmed it was a tragic accident. Elisa likely had a mental health crisis and ended up in the tank on her own. Her family filed a lawsuit against the hotel, saying it should have better secured the rooftop. But in 2015, a judge ruled the hotel wasn't responsible, since Elisa had used the fire escape to reach the restricted area. The Cecil Hotel later closed and reopened under a new name, trying to leave its dark image behind. Now that you know the truth behind these images, you can never unsee it. Which of these stories stayed with you the most? Let me know in the comments. And as always, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.